welcome back to another video. So today we're looking at language development, and this is part one of a two-part video breaking down language development in a lot of detail. So what does using language involve? It involves language comprehension and language production. Language comprehension refers to understanding what others say or sign, and language production refers to actually speaking or signing to others. Language comprehension is what leads to language production. There are several subcomponents of language. There's phonetics, this is the sounds of the language. Semantics, which is the system of decontextualized meaning. Lexical items, which are words, so for example mapping between form and meaning. Morphology, which is the grammatical structure of words. Syntax, which is the phrasal structure of the language or rules for combining words into sentences. And pragmatics, which is how language is used and interpreted in a contextually appropriate manner for the purpose of social interaction. These subcomponents can be broken down largely into language structure and also meaning. So syntax, morphology and phonology are under language structure, whereas semantics and pragmatics are under meaning. So let's start by looking at phonological development. What is a phoneme? A phoneme is a difference in sound perceived by the speakers of a particular language as discrete and distinguishing one word from another. The letters K and G are phonemes, so kill and gill are different words. There are differences across cultures, so for example, R and L are phonemes in English but not in Japanese. If we look at phonological development, individuals are born with an ability to discriminate sounds of any language. However, ability does decline within the first year. This was shown by Werkner and Lalonde in 1998. It's one of the reasons why some psychologists believe that newborn babies are both the most intelligent and least intelligent beings, as they have the capability within their brains to perceive any language, hear any sounds, hear the distinctions that you lose in later life. However, they're also the less intelligent as they're unable to utilise all that they are born with. So now if we look at the timeline of how it goes from a newborn through several months, looking at how phonology is produced. So between 0 to 2 months, babies have non-speech noises, so this is crying and fussing. They're not communicative and there are no differences across languages in the noises that they make. 2 to 4 months, there's cooing and more diverse vowels and the beginning of some syllables. Between 4 to 8 months, there are more obvious syllable-like units like ma or ah. And there are also a range of phonemes. Between 6 to 12 months, there's canonical babbling, which was found by Oller and Elias in 1988, and also real syllables that lead into their first words, and this is typically between 12 to 15 months that their first words might be spoken. Between 10 and 24 months, there is also more complex babbling, and some children use prosody. Now let's look at word learning or lexical. It can be difficult for some infants to get the right meaning for their word. There can often be overextension or overgeneralization. For example, the form of the word dog can be applied to puppies, pets, perhaps even other animals such as horses or lions, to just describe a type of animal that the infant is looking at. Another example of a young child's overextensions of word meanings includes the word ball, which could refer to ball, balloon, marble, apple, egg. The list goes on and on. Getting the right meaning often is seen as an underextension for infants, which is where a dog, for example, could refer to just his dog. It's also worth pointing out that there is an interesting difference between what we know versus how fast we're able to process it. And this is the languaging processing speed, which transitions nicely into morphological development. So what is a morpheme? It is the smallest meaningful unit of language. So for example, pigs, the S here means more than one, it's the plural. Kicked, adding the ed at the end of kick, here probably means happened before now, happened in the past tense. Reusable, the re at the start means again. These are examples where the smallest letter or combination of letters adds more meaning to the language that we use. An example of a letter that doesn't would be K. K is not a morpheme and it does not carry any meaning. Initially, toddlers combine words, often omitting many morphemes. An example of this is I eating or yesterday I dance. The rate of omission gradually decreases up to 3 to 3.5 years. By 4 years, morpheme omission is a sign of language difficulties. There's also learning to generalize regular morphological rules. In many languages, morphemes with a particular meaning, so for example past tense, may occur in regular, so for example adding an ed to the end, and irregular, so the irregular would be past tense words such as rode, went or drank. There's also generalization, which is being able to use a morpheme with a word in a way that it is not used, for example rote, learned. So over-regularization or overgeneralization is language errors in which children treat irregular forms of words as if they were regular. So an example of this would be a child saying, we holded the baby rabbits and we patted them. We can also see this with morphological overgeneralizations and U-shaped development. It is broken down into 3 aspects. Firstly, rote learning. So for example, irregular verbs, correct, held, went, wrote, swam, and later overgeneralizations of irregular verbs. So for example, holded, goed, righted, swimmed, signs of productivity. And thirdly, morphological overgeneralizations gradually decrease over time to reach adult-like levels. So why is this called a U-shaped development? That's because when we plot on a graph how children correctly pronounce forms over time, we can see that between 2 years and 8 months to 2 years and 11 months, there is a very low percentage of correctly produced forms, but on either side of this there are correctly produced forms, and that it's just between that 2 years and 8 months to 2 years 11 months that these irregular verbs are used in an incorrect way. So Berko in 1958 looked at morphological productivity. So a classic example is a picture of a bird and saying this is a wug, and then having 2 pictures of the same wug and saying now there is another one. There are now 2 of them. There are 2 followed by blank, and it would leave it up to the individual to fill in the blank with how they would perceive the correct way of identifying the plural. The test was devised to show that even though individuals did not know what a wug was and it was an unfamiliar term, the test showed that young children learn important aspects of language by finding patterns in the language that they hear around them. The reason for using a word that is nonsense and that a child will have not heard before is to make sure that they haven't simply memorised the plural of something. For example, knowing the plural of witch is witches. This is something that they may have heard in one of their storybooks. However, if the child is able to tell us the plural of a word that doesn't actually exist, then we know that they're able to understand the concept of how to make something plural. It was hypothesised that if knowledge of English was simply memorising words, then the child might be expected to refuse to answer the questions on the grounds that they'd never heard of what a wug was before, and could not possibly give the plural form since no one had ever told them what it was. However, this was not what was found within the experiment. The children answered the questions, and in some instances they pronounced flexonial endings that they had added with exaggerated care so that it was obvious that they understood the problem and wanted no mistake made about their solution. The test showed that children had implicit knowledge of English patterns for making nouns plural, verb tenses, and other basic morphological modifications to word stems, because they would attach appropriate endings to words that they have never heard before. I hope you found this useful, and remember part 2 will be coming up soon. Thanks, bye!